You know, if I had $1 each time a 4-star Electro Boy with a hood was released, well, I'd have $2 by now. Not a lot, but weird it happened twice. Anyway, Ororon is legit a great 4-star unit, although he has some peculiarities. But in this video, I'm gonna showcase his potential, teams, and all of his constellations. So if you want to find out if he's actually worth pulling for you, keep watching this video. So, starting off, in this showcase segment, Ororon will be using the Favonius bow, but I'll talk about his other weapon options later on, and then without a doubt, I'll be using the Scroll of the Hero of Cinder City, also known as a Scroll set, because there's nothing else better for him, just like I can't find anything else better than the company of my cats. Finally, his skill and burst are raised to level 9, and for now, he is Constellation 0. Okay, so a quick rundown of his kit. His skill shoots a ball of lightning and then deals damage once to a single enemy, and the number is pretty sad. However, if there are 2 or more enemies, the ball will bounce between them at most 3 times, but keep in mind if there's 2 enemies, then only 2 bounces, no bouncing back and forth. Also, when you use his skill, the second passive triggers, and within 15 seconds, if anybody in the team hits with normal, charge, or plunge attacks, both that on-field unit and Ororon, who is off-field, can recover 3 energy up to 3 times, for a total of 9 energy, which is really nice because the skill only generates 3 electro particles, so this passive is very important for extra energy generation. Now, when it comes to his burst, he will deal initial AoE damage, which again, small number, but then for 9 seconds, it will rotate in an area and deal even smaller amount of damage to enemies it comes into contact with. And against a single target, usually they get hit for 9 times. In addition, the burst taunts the mobs, so it can be useful sometimes with main DPS units who have bad resistance to interruption. But if both his skill and burst have low multipliers, how can he then deal good damage? Well, it's thanks to his first passive, and boy oh boy, get ready for some dank explanation of it, while in reality, it's a pretty simple coordinated attack. Basically, since every Natlan character has a Night Soul mechanic, this one is available from the passive, and here's how it works. Whenever anybody triggers a Night Soul burst, he gains 40 points, and then whenever he uses the skill, for 15 seconds, when any other team member deals Hydro or Electro damage, he also gains 5 points up to 10 times for a total of 50 points. Now, his bar can have up to 80 points, but he can generate 90 points. What's the deal? Well, that's because he can gain points even when he's not in his Night Soul blessing state. You see, whenever anyone, including Ororon, triggers Electro Charge reaction, he will then enter his Night Soul blessing state, lose 10 points, and an attack called Hypersense is delivered on up to 4 enemies and deals around 5,100 damage without any buffs. And usually, if Ororon is the only Electro applicator, when unleashing his whole kit, this can happen about 6 times on every rotation. However, if anyone in the party besides him deals Night Soul aligned damage, basically anyone from Natlan, he can also unleash this Hypersense attack and enter the Night Soul blessing state. So for example, in Chaska teams, even if no one's causing Electro Charge reactions, her damage can still summon those Hypersense attacks. Oh, and here's the peculiar thing. Technically, his Night Soul blessing state lasts for 6 seconds, and it says that every 1.8 seconds this Hypersense attack can happen, but in reality, quite often, this state just refreshes because when it ends, he doesn't lose the points. In fact, they remain for as long as he is alive. Sadly, the points do reset when you go to the next Abyss stage from the last one. Okay, now what's the actual situation with his damage? Well, with the current loadout and in Chaska's team with Farina and Benny, in this rotation without Benny's buffs, because normally you do Benny's burst and then switch to Chaska, he ends up dealing around 95,000 damage, which includes his skill damage, burst, the 6 Hypersense attacks, and the reactions he causes like Overload and Electro Charged. So for a guy who just quickly does his skill and burst and switches out, not bad. Keep in mind, this is still Constellation 0 performance, and he is using Favonius bow, since he really needs to have his burst ready at all times, for a reason I'll explain later in team section. But yeah, if you manage to trigger his burst consistently without Favonius bow, and nobody else in the party needs extra energy from the weapon's passive, going with another damaging option is obviously going to improve his damage. For example, a 5-star stat stick like Aqua Simulacra can easily boost his damage to 145k, or by almost 55% extra damage. damage. And because of the way his kit works, most 4-star and 5-star weapons function really well on him. So a 4-star like Stringless, for example, is great on him. Just keep in mind, his overall damage I showcased with that team is probably one of the best ones for his personal damage right now. And in any other team comps, he will usually deal less damage, unless they include Natlin units, since they help him trigger those hypersense attacks. But yeah, his first passive is needlessly complex, so I wrote down how it works in dumbed down version, and overall, his damage is pretty decent for C0 performance. But let's talk about the most critical thing about him. So, as I said, the Scroll Artifact set is vital for Ororon to function as a strong team member, since essentially he can easily boost everyone's damage when he causes reactions. However, that's not to say he doesn't have his own peculiar, let's say, problems. Okay, so for example, I really like this Ayato Soup team. It's made up of him, Benny, and Kazuha. Now, here's the tricky part. If you use something like Ayato's Burst and apply Hydro on enemy, then switch to Ororon, and he only does his skill, if it's a single enemy, due to the timing issues, he will not be in his Night Soul state when Electro Charge happens, and only ends up boosting damage by 12% instead of the 40% you could get. Now, there are two solutions. Either you fight two enemies who both have Hydro Aura on them, and then that skill is enough to trigger the Scroll Set's buff at full max 40%, since the skill bounce or the Electro Charge bounce will fully trigger it, or just use his Burst, which will then be able to fully trigger the Scroll Set without any problems. In a nutshell, if you want to guarantee the Scroll Set to work after any Hydro application against a single enemy, just use the Burst. Hence, why it's best to have the Burst ready whenever you switch to him. There are other peculiar situations with him, some that are more beneficial to be honest, but they are extremely niche. So let's talk about his teams instead. And man, he works in so many of them. Obviously, you may have already seen it, but he is Chaska's best teammate to help boost all her elemental bullets damage. So that's a no-brainer team. But then, if we look at other options, he can work quite well in a free-to-play Taser comp with Sucrose, Xingqiu, and Beidou. Or if you want to go detective mode, use Hazel. And Fischl instead of Beidou is also great. Then I even tested, and the good old national team can be boosted by his Scroll Set. All three elements will receive the 40% damage bonus. And of course, as I mentioned, this Ayato team works very nicely. I kind of forgot how brain-dead fun his slashing is. And now his Hydro damage is boosted twice, both by Kazuha and Ororon. In fact, same can be done with the legendary Ortrice Mécanique d'Analyse Cardinal team comp, where Farida, Nivelette, and Jean work super well together with Ororon. I'm telling you, these are just but a few teams I've shown since, basically, if you can find a way to reliably trigger the Scroll Set, he can be absolutely included in any team comp, since the damage boost is no joke, and even his own personal performance is pretty decent, although it definitely becomes better with Constellations. Let me show you. Okay, time for some power-ups. So, the first constellation has a big wall of text, but what it essentially does is that the skill will mark any enemy hit, and then for 12 seconds, they will take 50% more damage from the hypersense attacks, which is actually pretty nice, and this is the calculated boost to his overall damage after C1. Then, the second constellation will modify his burst, and now when he uses it, for 9 seconds he gains 8% electro damage by default, and then 8% more for each unique target it hits, for up to maximum of 32% electro damage. So against one target, that's going to be 16%, and then with 3 targets, he can max this out. Wait, I've seen this somewhere before. Anyway, third and fifth constellations just give his burst and skill plus 3 levels, and honestly, they don't deal that much damage, so this is also not that amazing. However, C4 is actually pretty awesome since now the burst rotates 25% faster, and you can see the rotation speed difference here, so faster damage and electro application, but on top of that, after casting burst, he gains 8 energy, so effectively his burst cost goes from 60 to 51 with second passive, to 45 with Scroll Set, and then finally gets reduced to 37 with this upgrade, and almost entirely fixes his ER issues, and you can just go with ER substats and DPS weapon. Now, finally, whenever you unlock his C6, maybe by the time Genshin 2 arrives, after triggering Hypersense, the active character's attack increases by 10% for 9 seconds, up to 3 times. So, 30% attack for someone who is on field when the hypersenses keep happening. And then on top of that, after using Ororon's burst, he will fire off 1 enhanced hypersense attack with a 200% multiplier of the original attack, which is a nice number you can look at. Overall, his constellations mostly boost his damage and electro application, while C4 helps him restore more energy, and I would say if you want to badly get more copies, stopping at C1 is totally fine, but C4 is good enough. Honestly, his C6 isn't that crazy like Farazan's or Goro's, which is actually nice for once, and his entire kit works without needing high-end constellations. So, what do I think about Ororon? Well, I am happy with his performance, and of course, a lot of that is being carried by the scroll set, even if it has some of its peculiarities when it comes to triggering it. But still, even at C0, single target damage is fine, while against multiple targets he will be better, and then extra constellations will only further improve his performance, as you can see the C6 footage I'm showcasing here. Like, I think if you don't want to wait around for another scroll set user who can interact with multiple elements easily, then he is a good unit to pull for, and if you are getting Chaska and get Ororon from your pulls, I definitely recommend raising him for her. Also, I didn't talk about this, but the high jump he can perform is seriously good for traversal. Like, look at how easily he can scale here from the ground to the roof, while other units like Kazuha could dream about this. And in Natlan, he can enable near infinite flight time with Chaska. So, I mean, this guy has some great value both for exploration and combat. Anyway, hope you found this video useful, and I would really appreciate it if you could press the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.